Welcome back to the Disrupt Education podcast. We were just talking off camera how our last guests, Rachel Flynn and Alli Privet, had some interesting times in classes in college. But I'm just going to leave it there because I think our whole point is the experiences is what we remember, and not quite all the tests and different things like that. But how's it going, Alli? We are in summer, the dog days of summer now. Just continuing to crush it. I know. Before we go into, kind of where you're at, I'm thinking as an educator, right? You're in July, and it's kind of like sometimes the Sunday scaries start creeping up. You're like, oh my gosh, you start counting down the days. But I'm taking a different look at it this year to just, kind of in the series that we're talking about here is just crushing it. Like, you know what? How can you just really start to have fun? And I think our last guest really dove into that in an outdoor sense. But yeah, what's been going on? What's happening with you?
I mean, I'm if you have not listened to last week's episode, you have to. It's fun. It's gonna change your mind on how to disrupt education in a way that we have not yet covered on the podcast with outdoor education and integrating that into the classroom. And summer for me, right, I have mentioned this, is now like my busy season
Yeah.
with skydiving in the Midwest and instructing with that. And then also my family owns a bed and breakfast retreat center in northern Wisconsin. And that's obviously the time of year right now when everybody wants to go to Wisconsin and Minnesota and visit the beautiful area. So it is like the on time for me, so to speak. And I love that because the summers, I it's just like a total different flip of when I was an educator. Is that the summers were when I would just sit by the pool and travel. I love to travel and experience things and get outside. And now I'm still outside in the summers, but I'm more working or just doing the things that I love rather than like using it as a time to like totally decompress. Like I love that the guests that we've had this season are all about when they're doing something that they're passionate about. One, it just exudes off of them, and then the downtime or their slow season, they're still actively pursuing what they love, and they're not really taking a break. They're just making different moves in that season. And so it's cool to see that and then also be like, I'm experiencing that transformation in real time myself. And it all comes down to disrupting the traditional learning model and what you think you have to do. I
Right.
think that was something Rachel, she didn't explicitly say, but in her story, right, she didn't go down the route of like med school in this pressure that she put on herself or from others that she had to do it. She ultimately was like, I love the outdoors and I want to pursue a career in that. And that's why, I mean, if you haven't listened to it, go back. That's what is kind of where we're starting this episode on, and keeping it light and fun for the summer, but also helping our listeners recognize that the outdoors is where it's at.
Yeah.
Education as much as possible.
100%. And I think along with that, continuing with our Crushing It series, it really is, just taking these risks and being curious. Again, I go back to one of the things that Rachel said is, just finding the challenge that you're looking for. I think everybody likes an easy part of something, right? Myself included. I think, in vacation, when you're off for a while or, things get really easy and monotonous, but you easily get bored. And I think that's what frustrates people. But then they get caught in that line between being bored and taking a risk, and they kind of get frozen, right? I sense a lot of educators do this as well. They may not want to change a class, or maybe they have to change a room or a grade level, or these things are happening right now. And I think, what our last guest brought to us was, all right, challenges are going to happen. Find out what challenges that you can actually pull and create out of
Mhm.
that. And that was the biggest thing that Rachel said that really struck me as, all right, everything is going to be a challenge. It's not going to be easy, but once you start into it and that's exactly what you want to do, you will level yourself up. And we've heard it from Peppo. We've heard it from especially setting goals with Nikki Green, Cindy Midget. Everybody we've had in the summertime has thought, okay, how can I make this better? And that's what I love about that. And it was such a different angle of something that I had stereotypes of in my head of what a job in this industry looks like. And that was Rachel's as being in parks. But she totally flipped it on its head, which I really loved. And that to me is something that I think we all want younger people to see so we don't get pigeonholed into doctor, lawyer, engineer, right? So that was
Mhm.
awesome.
There's so much we want to break down from what she said, and one of the things that I really love that she brought in is we asked her, like, you're in a state park and you have to meet the needs of anybody at any age, any experience, any educational level. How do you meet those needs? And I love that she discussed, like, you need more tools in your toolbox. And then she kind of gave these points of, like, humor, story, hands-on props, and using those tools to help you experience, whatever it is outdoors that you're experiencing. And I'm thinking back to when I was teaching, I regularly traveled as much as possible in the summers, and it was my way to experience the world and get out. And oftentimes, I would go on hikes and experiences, without a guide, but the guides we that I've been with would use those types of things. And the story that came to mind, Rachel talked about how she was doing a hike and the spider, wrapped this butterfly, and she'll never forget it, and the kids will probably never forget it. It doesn't matter the learning standards. And I had a similar experience in the Galapagos where I was touring this island with a guide and we were hiking up, and he's telling us about what's on it and the topography and whatever else humor and stories he was using. And all of a sudden he stops what he's doing and he's like, do you see those shadows in the water? And it was two sharks who do not typically work together because sharks are usually independent killers and hunters.
Yep.
But there was an injured seal in the shallow waters that they were trying to work together to get. And for the next 2 hours, it was like Animal Planet in real life. We were experiencing and watching these sharks attempt to attack and work together to get this seal. And you could see the shadows with the sun, and they would come, and then they would try and, like, do the rush attack, and the seal that had one injured flipper would, like, flip closer, and the other seals would come and, like, try and divert it. It was
Wow.
this whole scene.
Hmm.
And, like, I'll never forget that. It was the one of my top trip highlights, as the guide is literally like, we don't care about the schedule. I've never seen anything like this. He's telling us about the animal and how they hunt and what the normal thing, but he's like, I've never actually seen this. And we just were on this hike on this island at this point where you could perfectly see it, and just sat in the sun on the equator, because the Galapagos sits there,
Hmm.
burned while we were enjoying this spectacle. And just in case anybody cares to know, did the seal live or die? After 2 hours the sharks gave up and the
Wow.
seal still lived. However, it's unlikely the seal made it that long because it was injured. But for 2 hours, these sharks tried to get them, and it's like, I was never tested on this. Like, I've never like had to. I've told the story a few times, but, like, that experience not only connected me to that place, and it has, like, a lot of emotion around it, and it's fun to share, and it was outside and
Mhm.
it wasn't sitting in a classroom learning about how sharks hunt and how seals protect their own and ocean currents and sea depths and whatever else we were experiencing.
Mhm.
And it gave me so much more interest in those types of topics because I had experienced it, and it's like an anchor point. And to Rachel's work in the outdoors, man, if we can do anything to get students off screens, it's like
Right.
there's so much power in being outside. And it's like almost harder and harder to get kids outside because of the addiction of screens. And education is a place to tap into removing those barriers and getting kids to have experiences, maybe not the Galapagos and a shark attack with a seal, but you never know, right? The sky's the
Yeah.
limit. There are field
Yeah.
trips all over the world.
Right. It's very interesting because experiential learning, is really, what, Rachel was talking about on the parks piece, but you can take that. So, taking that, for example, and then also, we were talking before I was in Spain, and my wife and I were in Mallorca, and we took a cooking course. And it was great. We went to the market with our guide, and then she was talking. She literally broke down every piece. Like, so this is grown. And Mallorca has very different climates all over the island, and they were talking about all the different foods and how they're grown and why they eat like a lot of pork. And you're like, this is an island. Why are we not eating a lot of seafood? Well, in the older days, like they had walls because they had to protect themselves, and like when invaders would come, legitimately pirates would come, and they'd have their own stock so they can just feed themselves. So they would have their own, like, pigs and goats and different things like that they would utilize as food. But why do I know all this? Because I was experiencing it. We were outside at a market. The kitchen was a garage that she had converted into a kitchen. So we're pretty much outside in the kitchen. It was wonderful. But like you're saying, you're experiencing these things. Um, we did have one piece, and I can't remember what it was, but there was something that was in season that hadn't been seasoned. I think maybe it was dates or something. And of course, she's like, I'm going off track, right? Because this is here right now, and I didn't know they were going to be here, and da da da. But to our point is, now's the time. If you're in a pause, right, as an educator, or you're in it, to really give yourself that kind of what if, right? That what if I did this or tried this? What if I just took kids outside for an afternoon and had them see things? Or like me, we're in a work program, so we're already kids are outside of the classrooms and different things like that. But anywhere along the way, I think there is so much potential here, and a lot of things that are being missed. And then I think you said it in last week's podcast as well, is that autonomy, right? If you are an educational leader, and obviously there's safety and different things like that, but you give your educators autonomy. Like, give them autonomy and say, hey, here's what I want you to do. You do this great. Go find something that's tangible. I'll set aside a day. I've had a lot of leaders do this. We'll just, sign you up for a PD day. Guess what? We'll take care of subs and all that stuff. And I know that's work, but to your point, like that, just that autonomy to really build, and then you get more curious. And Rachel is a perfect example of being more curious and trying to find those challenges. So I love that. And thank you for telling me, because I was like, what's going on with the seal? Did it make it?
Like, whenever I tell the story, if I don't share what happens to the seal, everyone's like, well, did it live or did the shark skin it? I mean, they could have come back, but we had left it at that point.
Right.
The other piece here with this autonomy, and we've heard it with Peppo, we've heard it with Cindy, you're hearing it with Rachel, is that and this idea around the right challenge
Mhm.
for you students are naturally curious. Human beings are naturally curious. We don't need to beat it out of them by this traditional model of school. And right, Rachel shared the story of her younger brother who struggled with school, and it's the opposite of her. She loves school. Well, there's just so much there's so much potential that is not tapped right now with just being outside, and then this autonomy piece with educators. It seems like we're trying to box kids and box educators into cookie cutter models, that everybody's on the same page at the same day, they're taking the same assessments, the same tests, and it's like that's not what people are going to remember, the teachers themselves and the students. And I think it's a wide open field of possibility, and I'm talking state and federal levels, to release some of the standards to give teachers and students the ability to have more autonomy. Because as we have seen time and time again on the podcast with those at the top of their field, it's because they have gotten more and more like the ability to grow on their own terms. Like, I don't think burying people in standards is really going to get the growth that you want. I mean, people are going to rise to the level that you allow them. And if that level is like, okay, well, we learned about the periodic table and you knew your groups, you knew your periods, you knew, these are the atoms that you have to have memorized because the state said so. Well, the kids and teachers are going to check the box because that's the job. But like, how much more interesting is chemistry when it's like in a cooking class and you're experiencing it and seeing it happen in real time, or doing a construction project? I mean, materials of any kind, being outside in nature, there's so much applied science and history and English and all of those things, right? Like even the business model of these parks. Rachel was talking about the grants and funding. Well, somebody has to like create that system and manage it. And so like, there's a place for everybody in any system. And like, that's the part that I think education is missing. It's just trying to funnel people into a very narrow path. And we're trying to be like, no, let's widen the path.
Right. Yeah, I think there are moves. I'm lucky enough to be moving into a district that is extremely forward thinking, in the fact that they're connecting academics and reality. So really trying to give people the experiences, and they're bold enough, because they're a full K through 12 district, that they're digging into youth. Like, I mean, they're talking to getting into like second, third, fourth graders and starting to have these conversations where, it's not just, again, I know it's always the big three, like a doctor, lawyer, engineer, right? And traditionally, for some reason, those are like the three big things. But I was even conversating with the mayor of Naperville, and he was talking, he's in the concrete engineering industry, and he was like, we didn't even know. We're like, oh, well, there's like so many different paths within even those three big ones. And then, as an interpreter in state parks, I'm like, that was funny that she said, I don't speak 8 languages. But really, she does speak languages. It's just the language of the parks and what they do. But, those types of things. And I think we're getting there to get more and more open with our youth, and letting them know what these different paths are. And then also, I think, getting down to the basics, right? Rachel put this very well, is I didn't realize, she said, how much I enjoyed being outside, right? Until I was given that opportunity, and that was in college. And I will say, unfortunately, that was in college, right? Because I think we can give like kids more and more, and then have them reflect on it, right? So, as an educator, I know, like, again, we're deep into July here, and things are going to start picking up again on the education world. But, reflect, like, what did you really like about this time off, or maybe you were teaching summer school. What was different that you did? Or maybe you're in a year-round school, but like go back a month and see where were you most interested? And
Mhm.
then how can you make it better and bring it into the classroom? Um, this kind of all goes back into that educational burnout thing, right? Like a lot of people were talking about, we talked about it on the podcast before. Um, and then even going all the way back to going beyond the score. But the burnout really is us hitting our heads trying to do the same thing over and over again, and honestly expecting a different result. I mean, it kind of is. And we've kind of thrown in the towel. I'm guilty of it. Like sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, I just can't do it, and da da da. And you feel down. But once you start to turn that mentality, and really start to turn your mindset into, okay, I can set myself up for success here. Um, it this I think is where crushing it begins. And
Mhm.
it was interesting. I was having a conversation again with a previous student of mine who is in the fashion world, and he is in charge of, he's a middle manager, and he's in charge of hiring, right? And he hires on mindset. It's all mindset. Like he tries to figure out where this person's mindset is. Even mentioned in conversations, like there's two types of people who come up and begin a conversation with something negative or positive, and that makes a big difference. So I mean, I think that's kind of like crushing it here. And the final thing that I heard Rachel say as well is, when she it takes you 2 years to know your role. She said that, right? And
Mhm.
if we're not willing to put in the time and go through the micro mini failures that they're going to happen, right? You're not going to get anywhere. You're just going to spin your wheels, and you're going to bounce to the next thing, and you're not going to embrace those challenges. You're just going to throw them off. And I think that is a very important part of when you start to find your why, and how are you going to get to it, is not going to be easy, right? She just didn't step into this role. None of the people we talked to stepped into the roles they were. We can go to Nikki, we can go to Cindy, we can go to Robert, and more. Um, there was a difficult period, and sometimes the difficult periods come back, right? I just talked to Robert a couple of weeks ago, and somebody had hit the truck that he built, right? Like, and it's okay, like, no big
Yeah.
deal, but like he had to deal with it. So it's not always going to be, horseshoes and rainbows and things like that. It's going to be tough. But if you're prepared for it, I think that's really, I love that Rachel said it's going to take you 2 years to know your like your position, your role very well. So,
Mhm. I remember feeling like in teaching the demand of it. I
hmm
remember somebody saying it's going to be at least 3 years
hmm
before you feel comfortable even in the classes that you are currently teaching. That assumes they don't change too much over 3 years. And I remember someone saying you're really not going to like get your stride until like year 5 to 7. And I definitely felt that like difference between years 5, 6, and 7. I wouldn't even say it was year 3. And I mean, there was some things like established in that I felt like more comfortable dealing with, but I guess I didn't have that really like global view for even
hmm
later. But to the point of feeling challenged by the role, I would say it was between years 2 and 3 where I'd stopped feeling like, oh my gosh, like this is everything I think about, and it like consumes every part of me. Like teaching, for those who want to be in education, like there is a point where you you aren't necessarily challenged in the same ways in the role. So you
right.
can then choose to challenge yourself in new ways, which, if you're trying to crush it in the area of expertise that you bring to the educational field, that's the relentless drive that we're trying to encourage is like find something new to challenge you, even if you're in the same quote unquote role, because there are ways to challenge yourself and your students and your school leaders and your community in any level that you're at in the educational system. And I think that that is a really good point that Rachel brought in her own career development, that is not traditional education, and yet she has moved basically from like what would be a classroom teacher role to an assistant principal to now a principal to now she's kind of at a like director type level. If we want to like make it an equivalency, she's gone up the chain in Texas state parks, but it is related to the school system. And when you find someone that's like really passionate about what they do, but she still hasn't lost sight of like what the teacher or her interpreters need. And I think that's the key difference that I was thinking about with her role and then the traditional model is that when you get to that principal, director, superintendent level, when are you going into a classroom and teaching a lesson? She said she just recently went on a hike because that was the needs that one of her like teachers equivalent needed.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not beneath her or below her to do that. She does whatever it takes. And I'm sure there are superintendents and leaders who do that. But it was an interesting take on like, yeah, everybody in the community can participate in the like hands-on, like day-to-day classroom experience to enhance it.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was a she's outside of education, but she's really inside of it, just in a different field.
Well, I'm gonna give you a huge compliment here because finding the gaps, right, is what this she's doing, right? She's finding the gaps that are in there. And for someone like yourself, Alli, let's think about this, right? The person who's bringing more women into skydiving, like you're doing that, and that's a why, and that's something that is amazing that you're doing, and you're leading it, right? And it's not easy, right? However, as you're doing it, you just start to grow. And then all of a sudden, and you told her she was an expert in this field. Well, you're an expert in your field, right? The hours are almost there, don't worry. But that's exactly what, I think makes people just grow. I mean, and just get to levels where we never thought we could go, because you're letting people experience things that they never thought they could experience, right? And you're giving them the power to do that, and you're also giving them the confidence to do that, right? And I don't care if you're in a Texas state park or 12,000 feet in a plane over rural Illinois. I think it's amazing what educators can do. And if you all can keep that in mind, I'm talking to all the listeners now, like the things that when you find like what this challenge is a pretty easy challenge for me, how can I make it better? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And my colleague, I'll give him a shout out here, Brett Thompson from Naperville. We just had a conversation about it, and he's like, how can I make it better? Our programs that we have in school. Those are the types of people you want to be around, right? And if you need anybody to be around, it's these people that we're talking about on the podcast. There's a lot of them, but especially for this series, we're talking about Robert, Nikki, Cindy, Rachel. But constantly get yourself around people who are like, okay, how can we make it better? And don't sigh at it, like, because as soon as you start to like doubt yourself, guess what? We all have doubts. I've had doubts. I've talked to my wife about different jobs that I've taken on and different things, and I have can I do this? And that's natural. But if you surround yourself with those people who are doing amazing things, I'm honestly just sitting here, and I can visualize the top one of the top educators in skydiving is sitting right here on the podcast, right? You see these things because that's your why. And I'm not saying that because you're sitting right here because I see you doing it. and partially because I saw some pretty cool video last week. But yeah, I mean, these are the things that make us tick. So if you're an educator, wherever you are in education, start to really dig into that why. Why did you get into it? Go to those feelings, go to those thank you notes, because they're out there, and rejuvenate yourself. Change your mindset slightly, just a slight angle, and say, what if? And then try some of these things. Get outside, set big goals. Try to connect it to something in the world, and basically challenge yourself. So that's kind of where I'm at. Where do you want to leave this one, Alli? Because I'm just like, I'm literally sitting here thinking this is amazing. And I'm like, as you're speaking, I'm like, wait, here you are doing these amazing things as well, and really have a mission. What's your final thought on challenging people and continuing to crush it here?
Two final thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
One around the skydiving, it is very non-traditional way to educate and teach, for sure. Totally different type of classroom. And it is still very challenging for me. In 2 years, I'm coming up to 2 years into the sport, and I'm soon around. It'll be in August is when I'm taking the tandem instructor rating course, which is like basically when it's the highest level you can get before like a pro rating and then jump into stadiums and stuff. But it's the level where you can then take people attached to you to then go on their first skydive. I'm currently like a solo instructor, which is still a high level, but not at like it's even higher level to do the tandem, because there are different safety considerations. So on that front, like, I am still very challenged by it, and I continue to do that within this very non-traditional field. Most people aren't like, oh yeah, I want to be a skydiving instructor and like go that route. But something that Rachel actually, she kind of mentioned it, but I wanted to say to teachers, is that she actually gets a lot of applications from educators to work in the state parks. And she kind of mentioned that with like interview questions. But if you are an educator and you're like, man, I want to spend more time outside, right? Or if you're a student, you're in high school, you're in college, or you have children of that age and you listen to this podcast, they have really cool work opportunities, part-time, full-time, because all these parks have their peak seasons. And so it might be something that you yourself want to challenge yourself with. And I wanted to plug that because before, Rachel got into this role, I never was like, oh yeah, I could work in a park and be like an assistant park ranger. And your background in education is actually super valuable to basically education outside, like, right? And if you yourself are like, I need to get outside more, I actually love the outdoors, what a great opportunity for you. So if you even want to connect with Rachel to be like, how do I even get into this field, right? She's definitely a resource, because she started, like she said, in a contract role and like grew into a full-time role and has bounced all over in that. And she didn't kind of highlight her background with like getting a master's and beyond, to specialize. But it's just like, when you find something and you're like, you really resonate with whatever that is, you're going to continually challenge and grow. And I think that's what's so exciting about this series, which I've absolutely loved doing, and making this just this awesome summer podcast that me and you have gone through like transitions in the last 2 years. And now you are embarking on a new role. And so it'll be interesting in 2 years from now, right? Like, where are you at? Because 2 years ago, I didn't know where I was at. Now we're like 2 years into podcasting together, which is also very cool.
Yeah.
Because I just want to highlight that we have done now over 100 episodes together.
There we
and
go.
That's exciting.
Yes. I mean, time flies when you're having fun, right? I mean, it does. And yeah, that's a great, kind of ending to this one. But yeah, what you said. I mean, for real, like it really is. There's so many opportunities out there. And really though, once you find something that you're very curious about and you're very engaged in, you can go deep, right? And I think, just to kind of go back one last time to what Rachel, was pre-med, right? Same with you.
Oh, pre-dental, but yes,
Pre-dental. All right.
similar,
Well,
similar.
medical field area. I don't want to get into the dentist versus, doctor fight, but, like, and still, changed out of it. I think what we're looking at here is that pivot is available. It's out there for you. You will find your people. You will find challenges, but you'll also be able to find a way to maximize your goals and then maximize what you want to do. And going back to Robert, just crush it. So for Alli Privet, I am Peter Hostrawser. Check out our LinkedIns and everything else down below. Listen, share this out. If you see somebody else, who just needs to crush it, we have an entire series, go back 6, 7, and we are set to go, continue on. Thank you so much for listening to the Disrupt Education Podcast. We'll catch you next time. Thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode of the Disrupt Education Podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode.
Are you ready to disrupt the educational arena you're a part of? For more ways to get involved in the work we do here at Disrupt Education, check us out at disrupteducation.co or find us on LinkedIn at Peter Hostrawser or Alli Privet.
Our mission here is to help facilitate and amplify changes in the educational system through local initiatives and help you scale them into community movements. Our building network of disruptors in education are working to move beyond scores and grades as the only measure for student learning. If your school district, college, campus, or organization is looking for facilitators of this work, reach out on our website or social media.
And if you have any thoughts or feedback on this week's episode or any episode, we'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep pushing the boundaries, taking risks, and most importantly, disrupting education.